her 18th birthday. And joining me now is the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren. Ambassador Oren, thank you very much for joining us. Let's begin, if we can, with some good news for a change, and that is the release of this American mother and daughter. What's your response to that, and why do you think that this is happening now?
Well, thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me. Well, we're delighted that Judith and Natalie are being reunited with their family. We want all the hostages to be reunited with their families unconditionally at once. And that would be very, very welcome. It's no substitute for our need to deal with Hamas, to uproot and destroy Hamas.
And do you think Israel has delayed a ground incursion to allow more time to negotiate the release of hostages? Do you think that's entering the equation here? And do you think that should be urged at this point? If there is some progress in getting hostages out, maybe now is the time to hold off a little bit. What do you think?
No, I think that our clocks, our schedules are not timed to Hamas's clocks. We have many, by the way. For example, we have 360,000 reservists who've been called up. These are people who have left their jobs, their families, their children. They can't remain mobilized forever. That is a clock, certainly. There's a clock of moving the Palestinian civilian population away from the battle area to reduce civilian casualties as much as possible. That is progressive. So there are a number of clocks here, not to give time for Hamas to decide whether it's going to release hostages. As delighted as we were that Judith and Natalie Ra'anana were reunited with their family, we understand what Hamas is doing. It's trying to release hostages in sort of a drip way, in order to drive a wedge between Israel and its democratic allies, particularly with the United States of America, to get calls for a ceasefire to negotiate more time. What does that mean, a ceasefire? Ceasefire means Hamas wins. Ceasefire means Hamas gets away with massacring, torturing, burning, raping 1,500 of our citizens, firing thousands and thousands of rockets at our neighborhoods, including this neighborhood. Gets away with it. That's what a ceasefire means. And what it really means essentially is that Hamas is not holding hostages just in Gaza. Hamas is holding all of us hostage. And we can't let that happen.
And what is your sense as to what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing? There were some expectations, a lot of expectations, really, that this ground incursion was going to begin maybe even a week ago. And I'm just curious why you think that might have been delayed or pushed off a little bit. Did it have something to do with the president's trip? He was making a lot of diplomatic appeals. He's really inserted himself into this crisis. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I'm not a spokesman for the government. I will tell you that my feeling was that they delayed it for the president's visit. They delayed it because of the Anthony Blinken Secretary of State visit. They may have been delayed it also because of the hospital incident and clarifying that Israel was not responsible for the death that occurred in the parking lot of that hospital. There are many factors that went into it. But again, our clocks are ticking, and those clocks are, you can't keep 360,000 basically young people. These are the most productive part of our economy, mobilized indefinitely. Morale issue, they're ready to go. As for the actual fighting, unfortunately, I've fought in Gaza several times, and it's a nightmare, Jim. It's not like you see in a movie. It's alleyways and cul-de-sacs that are heavily mined and wired, and then the major fighting is not above ground; it's below the ground, where Hamas has dug countless miles of tunnels and bunkers, all of them mined, all of them booby-trapped, and Israel's going to have to fight below the ground as well.
And I know you don't speak on behalf of the Israeli government, so let me ask this question, and that is, what do you think of the wisdom of sending in a large-scale ground contingent in to conduct this incursion? Do you think that is the right approach?
Well, it's certainly wiser than sending in a small contingent. This is a major ground operation. You want to do it with sufficient forces. I think we've learned, though. Remember, we went in on the ground in 2014. It was a very costly operation. We didn't go deep into Gaza. We only went in like a mile or two. This is actually going to go into the heart of Gaza City and root out Hamas. And I think the Israel Defense Forces have learned to proceed cautiously, with advances being preceded by artillery, by very strong intelligence to find out where the enemy is. Parallel to this will be unceasing efforts to locate those hostages and try to rescue them. And the big challenge there is locating them. We've had hostages in Gaza for years now, for years, and we haven't been able to locate them. Extremely difficult. So all that is going to be proceeding. So I don't think this is going to be a lightning strike. I think it's going to be a very cautious strike, moving, say, alley by alley, tunnel by tunnel, bunker by bunker. And you're going to get some really tough challenges because Hamas puts its major headquarters under hospitals. It puts its headquarters under schools. So you can imagine what a tremendous moral challenge that is, not just a military challenge. We're going to be grappling with all of that in the coming days.
And what unintended consequences do the Israelis need to be worried about at this point? Might you somehow trigger a response from Hezbollah? Might this spill over in ways that perhaps you didn't imagine? I mean, you're talking to an American audience here, and obviously there are folks here in the United States who remember, and you remember all too well, Ambassador, what took place after the United States went into Iraq, went into Afghanistan. They ended up being very lengthy and costly commitments.
Yeah, just a personal note, back in 2003, when I was merely a historian and not ambassador, I was called to testify in Congress about the impending invasion. And I said, invade, but then get out. Don't get involved in state making. So I hope that Israel won't get involved in state making in Gaza as well. And we actually have a plan for the morning after. I think that's what President Biden wanted to hear. And I hope it involves some kind of inter-Arab effort, maybe other Palestinian elements there, in order to create a stable government that can really enable Gaza to reach its potential, because there's amazing potential there. It's very fertile ground. What are the unlikely or the wild card situations? Yes, Hezbollah could enter, and we're poised and ready for that. My expectation is that Hezbollah will come in at a point where the Israeli army is deeply engaged in Gaza, perhaps tired from fighting for a week or two, and then Hezbollah could strike. We already now had these missiles fired at us from Yemen by the Houthi rebels, who are backed by Iran and the United States. The USS Carney intercepted those missiles, and we're very, very grateful for that. But that's just the opening shot of a salvo. There are pro-Iranian militias in western Iraq that can be fired missiles at us. It's Iran itself that can fire missiles at us. We have to be ready for every single contingency. But the wild card that right now really it scares me very much, because I've had a lot of personal experience. You're fighting in a densely populated area. Most of the civilians have moved away, but all you need is one tank shell or one artillery shell to hit a building and cause a great number of casualties, and that can change the course of a conflict. This has happened several times. It happened in our 2006 Lebanon war. It happened in an operation in 1996 called Grapes of Wrath against Hezbollah in Lebanon. One shell changed the whole course of the war. You're up against the law of averages.
Yeah, and that leads me to this question is, what are the prospects for the Israelis and the Palestinians to get back to the negotiating table, back to the bargaining table? And I guess perhaps this gets to the question of the mindset inside Israel right now, because when I talk to folks about this, they will say, Israelis will say, you folks in the United States, you just don't understand the way we feel right now, how we feel deep down in our bones about this, and why we feel like we need to, that this time is different. Is that perhaps standing in the way of getting back to the bargaining table to some extent?
Let me express it as a hope. One thing is certain. Right now, Israelis are saying, and the vast majority of Israelis are saying, look, there is a Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. It's headed by a gentleman named Mahmoud Abbas, who's in the 18th year of his 4-year term. He will not stand for re-election because he knows Hamas is going to win in Judea, Samaria, and the West Bank. And what if we had a Hamas state there, and not just in Gaza? Our entire state would be in danger of being wiped out. I'm actually sitting in southern Tel Aviv. I look out my window and I see that area. That's how close it is to here. I wouldn't be in rocket range. I'd be in rifle range. So I understand that. They're saying, most Israelis are saying we can't risk this right now. But I would express a hope that the elimination of Hamas, which has always been one of the major obstacles to war. I've been involved in the peace process going back to 1993. I was an advisor to the Yitzhak Rabin government during the Oslo process. We try to make peace with the PLO, with the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas came out and blew us up, but they also killed Palestinians. Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution, doesn't want peace at all. It'll blow it up. So the elimination of Hamas will remove an obstacle. And so being an optimist, personally, I hope that when Hamas is removed as that obstacle, we can begin to think about some type of reconciliation.
All right, Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you so much for those insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right, and to you as well. And we